First of all, your reaction to the loss of this great man, Captain Sir Tom Moore.
Well, it's really sad, isn't it? But he was such an inspiration, and that's the word I keep hearing people use. And the thing that I really loved, I agree with everything that you were just saying there. The thing I really loved is that in that first lockdown, when the NHS was under pressure, he asked himself, well, what can I do to help? And he decided that he was going to try to raise £1,000 to support the staff of the NHS, and he raised £37 million. But it was that sort of, well, I may be 99, but I'm going to do my bit, and I really admire that.
Well, there's a misunderstanding sometimes, isn't there, about that? In fact, the total, I think, was 39 million if you add all the gift aid in. But it wasn't going to go towards NHS core funding. It was going to go towards supporting and helping staff. £39 million. I mean, it's a Guinness World Record amount of money raised. As Health Secretary, what can you tell us about what that money went towards and how it did support those NHS doctors and nurses and staff who were struggling at that time?
Well, it's even better than that in that it's still going towards it, because some of it is being put into what I hope will be a permanent fund of support. And the family have been absolutely brilliant and thoughtful in how they've done this. There are some parts of of course, the NHS is funded by taxpayers, but it's the little extras that actually help staff to keep going, especially in a really tough time like this, and support more broadly. I'll let the family describe how they think it's best spent, because they're rightly the people to do that. But it is all about supporting staff, and the money's part of it. But what he also gave everybody was a bit of a lift, and he showed how much the whole nation supported.
One of the legacies that people would like from Captain Sir Tom is that it doesn't take a 99-year-old man to step up and raise that kind of money for the NHS. As we go forward from all this, can you make a commitment that there will be some serious funding going into the NHS to prepare us properly for any future pandemics like this, and just generally for the upkeep of this wonderful institution?
Well, yes, of course. Absolutely, from the taxpayers' money that I'm responsible for, but the fact that that people are willing to also give, I think, is a good thing. So it's a matter of and. So yes, in terms of improving the fabric and the upkeep of the NHS, not least with new hospitals where they're needed, also supporting the staff, and as you say, the pandemic preparedness work, so that we're better prepared next time round. I think all these things are incredibly important, yes.
Do you accept, I mean, obviously the vaccines, and we're going to come to that in a moment, has been absolutely a massive success so far for this country, and I congratulate you and your colleagues, everyone at NHS England, the British Army, the extraordinary other army of volunteers and pharmacists and so on. It's all been an amazing operation, which so far, thank God, is rolling out incredibly well. But of course, at the same time, we have this horrific death toll, up by over 1,400 again yesterday, well over 100,000 deaths now, one of the worst death tolls in the world. You talk about being better prepared for a pandemic. I mean, the stark truth is we were woefully underprepared for this pandemic, weren't we? And the reason I ask you that is that on January 23rd, you stood up in Parliament and said we're always prepared for stuff like this. But it turned out we weren't.
Yes, I think this is a really important point. There were things that we didn't have as a nation. We didn't have a large-scale testing regime, for instance, and we know that some of our close neighbours, like Germany, did have that in place, and it meant that they could get it going much faster. So I don't think there's any point being anything other than open and discussing this, so that we are better prepared next time. And boy, will we be. Like vaccines, you mentioned vaccines. I'm sure we can go through the great results we've seen from Oxford overnight. But one of the things in vaccines is that there wasn't a domestic onshore vaccine manufacturing process. We were great at the science and have been for decades, but there wasn't the onshore manufacturing.
And vaccines is definitely a success story, but we are still behind the curve, aren't we, in other measures? I mean, Last week, it was announced that there was going to be hotel quarantine for those people coming in from red list countries. This week, we still don't know when that's coming in. Meanwhile, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has said that Scotland will introduce that for anyone coming in from outside the UK. If we're going to announce quarantine, why don't we institute it?
Well, clearly the work is underway on that. But in the meantime, we have brought in isolation requirements by law for every single person who comes as a passenger to this country. So the isolation is required. Now, strengthening it so that in some instances, if you come from a high-risk country, you have to do that in a hotel. There's work underway on that. But everybody has to isolate, and we've strengthened the enforcement against that. I just want to also say that on the vaccines, you thanked NHS England. We should thank the NHS in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland too. You know, this is a UK.
I meant NHS UK, actually. Yeah, I misspoke there. But on the wider issue of border control, it has seemed baffling. You know, I remember interviewing you back in March last year and asking why we hadn't shut the border when many other countries were racing to do this. Priti Patel has now gone on record, the Home Secretary, as saying she was advising the government to shut down our border back in March. Did you share her view at the time? Has that been one of the other lessons that we've learned the hard way, that actually the countries that locked down their borders, particularly island countries, have been able to get on top of this and are now having relatively normal lives at the other end of it?
Well, it is very challenging to fully do that when you are a country that relies on imports and trade as much as we do. But there is undoubtedly the need, especially with new variants, to ensure that we take a precautionary approach until we have the vaccines ready. And that's why we've strengthened the measures. OK, let's turn to vaccines. It's been reported that you watched the movie Contagion, which I suspect we've all watched in the last year, and that you were very struck by some of the scenes, not least where there is a kind of horrible, unedifying scramble for vaccines. Let's take a look at a clip here. Now, is it true? I mean, there's a serious point to this, but is it true you watched that film and it did fill you with horror, that actually the parallels were quite similar, emanated from a bat in China and so on, but that you could end up with scenes like that if you didn't control the vaccine rollout properly? Well, I think the safest thing to say, Piers, is that it wasn't my only source of advice on this issue, but I did watch the film. That would be a bit worrying, yeah, if you were turning to Hollywood. But I did watch the film, and the film is actually based on the advice of very serious epidemiologists. But the insight that that was so necessary at the start was that the big moment of pressure on vaccines internationally would not be before they were approved. Of course, there was a huge amount of work then, but it's after they're approved. And so one of the things that I did early was insist that when we had the Oxford vaccine and we backed it right from the start, and that was great, I insisted that the UK production protects people in the UK in the first instance. And as UK Health Secretary, that is my duty. And also at the same time, we're making it available at cost to the rest of the world. I think, not enough people give AstraZeneca the credit for that. Other vaccine companies are making, tens of billions of pounds from their vaccines. How important is it that these developments overnight? One, that it seems that 2/3 of the people on the AstraZeneca trial showed no sign of transmitting the virus once they'd had the vaccine, which must be incredibly encouraging. That answers perhaps one of the burning questions. But also that the level of, generally across all the vaccines now, the ability to control the virus to the extent you don't have serious illness or death has been dramatically reduced. Yes, the news overnight on the Oxford vaccine demonstrates that the vaccine protects you and it helps cut the transmission of the disease across the whole community. It shows that the vaccine works and works well. And this figure of a 2/3 reduction in transmission is better than I expected. It is really good news for everybody. And it just shows that the strategy has been right of backing those vaccines. Yes. And the other finding, just one final point on that, the other finding in this report is that with the 12-week gap between first and second dose, you actually get a stronger overall protection than if you have a shorter gap.
You
So
do with the AstraZeneca vaccine, of course, but we're still not sure of the data on the Pfizer vaccine. Although I know that you say that Pfizer have data on that that's not shared publicly. What does this mean for the summer, Mr. Hancock? Because last week you said that we could all look forward to a great British summer. A few minutes later, Liz Truss, your colleague in the cabinet, said it's far too early to talk about travel plans. But if we do have this effectiveness for the vaccine, do you think we can start booking summer holidays?
Well, I'm optimistic that we will have a great British summer, as I've said. The challenge that we all still have is we've got to keep control of the virus, and so we've got to monitor progress. But the vaccine rollout is going well. The vaccines clearly work, and so this is really, really good progress.
Okay, final question and just a quick answer. The Germans, the French and others are casting doubt over the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine in relation to older people. Can you give an unequivocal guarantee to people here hearing this who are worried that there is nothing to be concerned about?
Yes, the science is clear, and the results from last night strengthen this, that this vaccine works against adults of all ages. And I think that it's so important in these judgments to follow the science. It's not just based on this clinical study, it's also based on lab studies of the response of people of different ages. And we will, as soon as it's validated, we'll publish the data from the actual rollout here in the UK, which links those people who've been vaccinated and then looks at who is testing positive to find out how the actual rollout across the country is working in terms of its effectiveness too.
OK,